Hello. It's Wednesday morning, and it's time for relaxing, not painting with Dice and Dungeons. Yeah, I'm off to a slow start today. Stayed up a little bit too late last night. Um, was watching the last episode of Top Gear with some family members. That's my personal disclosure today. Anyway, I'm working on the command module, which is the last bit. Well, it's a little bit of a lie, but pretty much the last bit of the Apollo model to be completed. And as usual, the parts are, badly made. There's lots of flaws in the injection molding, and so I've been spending some time cleaning them up. I got the heat shield done and the bottom part of the inside of the command module. I did those on Monday, and I'm test fitting them, and they kind of fit. The rest of this is not very detailed interior. All of these bits are actually like control panels, okay? And these are supposed to be the seats for the astronauts. So the things that are most problematic about the injection molded stuff is they come on these trees that they need to be cut off, and I cut off, leaving some extra plastic on there so that I don't create like a divot. If these just break off, they could break part of the model itself. And then, I don't know if you can see it here, I call it flashing. It's basically excess plastic that was oozed out between the two halves of the molds because they weren't put together that tightly. And the third thing that keeps showing up all the time are circles. I don't know why they keep showing up, but they are on every model, it seems. There's just a circle that's embedded in the model. It's just, if I can find one, maybe on the back. I don't know. There was some on here, a bunch on here that I had to clean up. Oh, and there's some in the headrests. You can see them in the headrests, each one of those. There's a circle on the inside. And those circles just show up as part of the injection molding process, and they have absolutely no function other than to look bad. So I'm going to continue the process of filing and sanding. This is the outside of the command module. Okay. Filing and sanding and test fitting. And then, I don't know, I think part of what I need to do is decide what color some of these are going to be painted. The instructions are pretty vague. The inside, like the control panels, are supposed to be painted light blue, and I've got some light blue. It says the seats are supposed to be painted light blue, but I have a picture of the interior. One of these things. This is the lunar module. Let me there. Let me the spacesuit. I'm going to show you. I'm just looking. Yeah, here's the picture of the real Apollo, right? I think this is Apollo 11. It's at the Smithsonian. This is the inside of it. And yeah, the instrument panels are painted light blue. I'll talk about those a little bit more. But the seats are not. The seats are actually a beige color. Okay. And if you can look at them, they look like they're just canvas hung on a frame. I mean, they're not. That's it. I guess that's to cut down on weight. And maybe they were comfortable. I'm not sure. But it doesn't look like it. Anyway, So yeah, these, which are the seats, which end up looking not at all like this, right? Um, I'm going to be painting. It's called Racing White. It's one of the 4 whites that I bought. Um, which I wasn't sure. Well, the exterior is white, so I bought different kinds of white to see which would look best. But the racing white is pretty close to this color, so I'm going to use it for that. The heat shield, okay, which this is not an accurate representation of the heat shield, because the heat shield had a metal honeycomb filled with ablative material, and this is just plain old flat plastic, and it's got these little feet on it, so that for display it can stand like that. Otherwise, it would just be all roly poly. Okay, so inaccurate. But the heat shield isn't the same color as the rest of the command module. It's not that pure white. It's kind of a grayish white. So yeah, I think, I'm going to use what I have. It'll look better than the painting instructions, but it might not be a perfect match. Kind of hard to tell. The capsule that's in the Smithsonian had landed back on Earth, and this whole thing had ablated away, and it's all scorched and things like that. So this is supposed to be before it's scorched. And then the inside, the instrument panels are painted light blue, and the inside of this will also be painted light blue. The outside will be painted white. I even talked about like this component. This goes on here. This will be painted white on the outside to match all the rest of it. These little bits here are where the escape tower sets. They have little pins, tiny little fragile pins. This one has some black ink in it. That's also very important that I not make that black ink disappear. Because the escape tower only fits on here in one way. So if I rotate it 90 or 180 degrees, it doesn't fit. Just because of the way the pins are set up when it was assembled. And these are the parachutes, okay? And these go in here. The hatch goes here. There's a hatch, okay, that fits in here. And then this goes over that. There's sort of a story behind all of these pieces. Anyway, the painting instructions say paint this brown without any additional detail at all. And I don't know if in a real Apollo the parachute covers were in fact brown. There's 3 parachutes here, here, and here. But the real parachutes were white and red striped. And it's sort of, you can sort of see striping on these. I'm going to have to think about that. I don't know if in the real Apollo it was just covered with some sort of fabric cover on the outside, like a parachute pack, or whether the red and white actually showed. I'm not sure. And then there's this detail here, I think of shroud lines, maybe. Or maybe the explosives that release the parachutes. I'm not sure. I'd like it to look better than just painting it brown. And then there's some little bits here, like the inside of door and some antennae that get attached to the outside of the command module. I'm probably actually going to cement those on before I paint it so that the paint looks continuous. There's some real problems with the inside here, and I'm going to have to decide how much work I want to do to get rid of those. There's lumps, basically, where this got pulled off the mold. I don't know if you can see it. You can see this one, where this got pulled off the mold, and bits of plastic just adhered. There's excess. So I'm just telling the story about what I'm going to be trying to do. The instrument panel, Alexis and I had a brilliant idea yesterday about what to do about the instrument panel, because the instructions just say painted blue. Okay. Like there's this bit, and then there's, I don't know how this actually fits on. I'm going to have to do a lot of test fitting to see how this goes together. But there's light embossing on here, which is supposed to represent the instrumentation on the instrument panel. Okay, you can see some on here as well. And we were just talking, and I was complaining about how badly, basically, this was done, because if you just painted blue, it's not going to look like the instrument panel, and you're going to actually be able to see a fair amount of it by peering in through the hatch. Not so much through the windows; those aren't much, but through the hatch, because the hatch opens. It's pivot hinged, and at least it's supposed to work that way. I don't know, like some other moving parts, I have my doubts about how well that's going to go. But we said, well, that's the kind of thing that they should just have a decal for it, right? Would it have been so hard to have made a decal that looks like the instruments on the instrument panel? Just leave this flat without embossing it and put the decal on. Then even here, it would be a large decal, or maybe it might be two. Okay. It doesn't seem like it would have been that difficult for the model designer and maker to make some decals. They've got some that say USA on it in the middle American flag that's supposed to go on the outside of this. And then we said, well, so let me show you what I'm talking about. This is what this is supposed to look like. Okay. And this too, this is another component of it. And I was thinking, well, maybe I could take the better part of what's left of my lifetime to try to paint some of this. And then that seemed kind of almost absurd. You can see it here too. The instrument panel looks like. Same, but whatever. So the thought was, well, if they didn't provide a decal, maybe what we could do is make our own. And not necessarily, it is possible to make decals. Okay, I know that can be done, but we're not equipped to do that. Have never done it. It would be difficult. But what we can do is we can take a picture like this, okay, and then use like Photoshop or something to, since it doesn't exactly match the pieces that we got in terms of size and shape, we can Photoshop it and then bring it down to the just the absolute perfect size, right? Size and shape, and then print it out on good high quality paper with really high quality printing and attach it to the instrument panels. So we're actually going to try to do that rather than trying to paint this onto the instrument panels. We're going to try to print it and attach it. That should be interesting. Yep. I've used up almost my generally allotted amount of time talking about stuff rather than doing them. I guess I will go on to sanding and painting. Oh, yeah, I was going to look at them. I'll do that after break or during break. The inside of this gets spray painted, light blue, as do the instrument panels. The seats will be kind of a yellowish white. I'm going to paint the heat shield kind of a gray color just to differentiate it from the rest of the capsule. These conduits and things are metallic, so those will be painted probably at least 2 different shades of metal. But the bottom of this is also supposed to be painted light blue. And with me, there's always the question of, do I paint the detail down to the surface or paint the detail first and then paint the surface up to it? And I've usually had more success painting up to it rather than down to it underneath. In the plastic, or is that a feature? No, that's a feature. Okay. I'll try to paint some of that detail. And there's like a little, like a bracket or something on the side of this rectangle. So I could just spray paint this whole thing blue and then paint the metallic on it. The problem with that is if I get the metallic onto the blue, because it's a spray, touching it up is difficult. I've done it before, but it would be in some ways a little bit easier to brush on a blue color. And what I was muttering about doing, that I was about to do but then decided to do later, is to see if I have brush on paint that is a close match to the spray paint. And it doesn't have to be an exact match because this is a different component of the capsule. It's not the inside where the crew is. It's underneath. And it's got mechanical stuff on it. The construction of this is actually kind of interesting because the crew couches are actually suspended above this area, and it was a big storage area. It was actually possible through some contortion to get out of the seats and down underneath them. Well, I've got all these things to do here, so I'll start doing them. I've got a file for the big pieces, some 800 grit sandpaper, my sanding block, all sorts of pieces of almost but not completely used paper that I haven't thrown away yet. Sometimes I've written on these so that I could tell what grit they were. Taking the ones that need to just be tossed and putting them up off camera there. It feels like the 800. This feels like an even finer one. This is 600. Okay. I don't know why I'm conserving all of this used up sandpaper. I have sheets of it. I can just cut more pieces off. This really in here, rooting through this here, all these bits of still sort of usable sandpaper that I just can't bring myself to toss until they're absolutely useless. It goes back to when I was a kid and had no money. And so if I used up my sandpaper, it was gone, you know. It's like a one-time extravagance to get the stuff. Okay, this is all trash. And the inside of this is a mess, so I'll just take care of that later. All right, well, enough of that. I'm going to try to keep this on camera as much as I can. I'm using this mark here as my spot. If I'm on that, then I am on camera. To say that I don't know if you've watched the previous streams. You really should watch the first before break, the first couple hours of, hours of Mondays, relaxing painting with Dyson Dungeons, which had there actually was a tiny little bit of painting in it. I mean, a tiny bit of painting, but it was the epic conclusion of the descent stage of the lunar module. Yep. On Monday, during the first 2 hours, roughly the first 2 hours, I managed to get all the little spindly legs of the descent stage, the part that landed it on the moon and stayed behind, of the LEM, the Lunar Excursion Module, completed without breaking anything, which was actually kind of shocking. And so today, as I'm doing this is compared to that actually quite relaxing, because I'm not dealing with tiny little bits of very brittle plastic that could fracture at any moment. And if they fractured, then it would be next to impossible to repair it in a way that it worked. And the other miracle, other than finishing it, was that they actually retracted the landing gear, fold up under whatever. I can't show it on camera. Here, I'll show it in the instructions. They fold up underneath the LEM. That's the ascent stage, but these are the legs of the descent stage. They fold up underneath there. Here, you can see it better here. See how they fold in? Okay. And then they fold out like this for the landing. This mechanism made up of these little stringy bits of brittle plastic actually do fold and unfold. A little bit of a scare. Once they were unfolded, they tend to lock a little bit. And so getting them to fold back up again was like, oh, too much pressure could just destroy the whole thing. But for storage purposes, they're now folded. Okay. And at some point in the distant future, I'll have to decide what to do about displaying this. So here, this picture is a nice depiction of all the components of the whole thing. This is the escape tower. First part I got built. This is the service module. Actually, a door on here opens up and you can see some not very authentic, but, impressionistic detail, the inside of the service module. There's the ascent stage, which was completed a while ago, and it came out okay, considering some of the parts were really, really difficult to work with. They just didn't fit at all. And the flaws that one sees looking at the model are for a large part due to the fact that the parts just didn't fit. And then there's the descent stage. This fairing, okay, this thing here, is the housing for the lunar module, and that's ready to be done at any time. I just need to cement these hinges on so that they fold and unfold. And I haven't done that because then I'll have this big thing and no place to store it. As it is, I can store the parts. So there's all of that, and then this is the last part getting done. And as you can see, it's really kind of interesting that this, which housed the 3 astronauts to the moon and then back and landed, is like the smallest component of all of these. It's the smallest component of all of these in the entire Apollo thing. And at the time, it was considered to be a very spacious spacecraft. Actually, the lunar module, the ascent stage here, is fairly roomy. In fact, it served as they called it the lifeboat on Apollo 13. When part of this blew up, the 3 astronauts were able to stay in here and use its life support system while they shut down everything in this command module, because the thing that blew up basically took their electrical supply away. So they only had some batteries and things. And so they powered this down so that they had enough to control the landing. And they lived here. It's not set up as like a real comfortable hotel room or anything, but it's actually fairly large, actually, even compared to this. Part of it, though, is that it's housing a rocket motor because it has to launch from the moon and dock with the command module. So anyway, there's that. So this is the thing. This is the whole thing. Everything is completed except putting these hinges together and this command module. And so this is the last bit that's getting done. The reason all these parts come apart is that you're supposed to be able to recreate the Apollo mission with the model. If I wanted to waste more time, I would show that to you again. And get the instructions for the command module. The command module was actually supposed to be the second thing done, but I'm doing it last because there's just... At the time I was building this looked really challenging compared to the rest of it. Okay, and compared to the service module, which was this is a fairly simple build. The lunar modules turned out to be difficult builds, so by the time I get to this, if the pieces fit, they should be it should be fairly easy to do that. Looking at the painting instructions. Oh yeah, there's actually sitting down astronauts. I've got those. Yeah, light blue, silver. Yeah, very helpful. H is light brown, yeah. So the parachute covers are supposed to be painted light brown. I don't know, whatever. No painting instructions for the inside of the capsule here. No, anyway. Yeah, let's go get back to the task at hand, which is to get these parts ready for assembly. Think of some sort of thing to talk about, because there's no music playing. We don't have any relaxing music at the moment. The process here is going to leave a little spot that has a slightly different surface texture than the unsanded spot. In some cases, like the bottom of the heat shield, okay, I just sanded the whole thing so that the whole thing has the sanded surface. In this particular case, this is going to be painted a glossy color. I'm going to use an extremely fine grain polishing paper and just use it to polish out any abrasions. They're not even scratches. They're just, not smooth. I'm being careful because I don't want to like scratch up any more of the surface than is necessary to get that little bit, that little nubbin of plastic there that's left over from where it was attached to the tree. And I felt that, I've noticed that just running my fingernail across it, it's actually, because it's all white on white, it's more accurate to feel whether that's smooth or not than it is to see it. There's just, it's a little nubbin of plastic that just isn't disappearing. I think sometimes what happens is that, like, that excess plastic actually, it's like the knot in a tree trunk, where a branch goes in, that it goes in deeper than just the surface. I've learned, that these little differences in surface texture that like comes from the sanding actually continues to show up even through a layer of primer and cover coat. I don't know why, but it does. They're doing before all of this. That isn't what I meant to say. What was I talking about the last time I talked about something other than the thing I was working on? I think I was talking about Tom Terrific and the greatest hero ever, and whether or not Tom Terrific really was even a hero, much less the greatest hero ever. And that kind of led into a speculation about if Tom Terrific wasn't the greatest hero ever, who might be, and sort of, talking about other superhero types. I was reaching the conclusion that, at least for most of the time, Superman wasn't even a hero because he wasn't doing anything that was actually risky to himself. Being Superman, being impervious to practically anything, any kind of injury or harm, running into a burning building to save somebody if you're impervious to fire or heat isn't really heroic in the way we would often think about that. What the heck is that? Yeah, so going around it, can you see that there's a little dark spot there now? Right here? That is one of those spots where when this pulled away from the mold, it left a flaw. And so there's just this little bit, tiny bit of a flaw there. And I'm going to use this extremely fine polishing paper to try to minimize the came off easily enough. Now I'm just polishing the areas that I was using the other, actually quite fine, but not polishing level fine. This is very fine. I actually used it on a clear part. A drop of cement had to hit the clear plastic on a canopy, and sanded it out with a little coarser than this, and then used this to polish it, and it actually worked. You can hardly see that there was a spot there. So these sorts of things, these are going to be painted white. It's sort of a pearlescent white, so it has the same sheen, really. It looks very much, after it's painted, just like it does before it's painted. So why bother priming it and painting it when it's all painted? It looks just like it does now. I'm asking that question to myself. Why, really? As I'm looking at this, well, I don't know. That's how it is. That's what's happening. But there's these little holes here, these little indents. Those are like jets. Those are going to be painted flat black, or at least I'm going to try to do that. They're like attitude control jets. Still a little, there's still a little lump there. This bit of plastic is not giving up. I'm going to clean this one up and then do some test fitting around the top of this. And I'm digressing. As I'm looking at this, I'm seeing that even the inside of this is not well molded. You can see it right here. There's less plastic here between the rim, and then it extends out here. Somebody who is incredibly detail oriented would probably try to even that out. I just want to make sure it's not in the way of the assembly. This part, move this over so I can see all the parts. This part fits in here. That's the parachute stuff. There's flashing and excess plastic from the trees here. I'm going to play around with this when it comes time to paint this to see if I can't get some detail on it. There's like parachute shrouds here, and then the folded parachute. And just painting it brown makes all that detail disappear. I'm going to do the old going online and see if there's any pictures of what it's supposed to look like. And then it's packed in this thing, and there's this rim around the bottom, and that is almost certainly those aren't parachutes. That's part of the structure of this. I might paint that a different color too. I want to see how this fits together first, though. But there's the opportunity for a fair amount of painting here, other than just painting the inside blue and the outside white, and an opportunity to experiment with pretty much fabricating not decals, but more like stickers. Okay, like stickers that would make the instrument panel look a little bit more realistic. Guess I don't have to worry. Well, yeah, parts of this are gonna show. I'm just saying the way this fits in here, a lot of this rim is going to be covered up. So there's questions like even this, okay, this part that goes here, and this actually gets launched off fairly early in the mission. Well, actually, no, right near the end before the parachutes come out, it has to be launched off because it's covering the parachutes. But the inside, okay, reason it doesn't fit well. Yeah, I thought I had it, and then I turn it over, and I can just see there's ragged edges. There's a spot here that isn't flat. This will add time to this whole thing, but the outside is painted the same pearlescent white that looks, like I said, looks almost exactly like it looks now with the raw plastic. But the inside, I think, I'm going to take the time to paint it the same color that I used for the inside of the fairing that holds the LEM and the inside of the service module. Sort of, ouch. It's been so long that I can't remember what I've done. Whatever. I'll take a look at my paint samples a little bit later. Just trying to get rid of lumps of plastic that are not where they're supposed to be. Sanding down lumps of plastic where they're not supposed to be, I have found, is much easier than filling in gaps or holes where plastic should be but isn't. Possible. I try to make sure that I'm sanding down rather than filling in. Despite, what I read about filling in and then sanding after filling, and 4 different materials that I've used as a filler, I have yet to find one that really works very well. There was one that was so highly toxic, it basically said, it's a tiny little tube with a tiny little opening, filling in tiny little holes. And it just said, wear a respirator outdoors. I'm exaggerating, but it was almost like that. Don't let it touch your skin. Um, so it was, well, I don't care how well it works. It's too dangerous to even have around. So that was eliminated. And then I got another one that, said, be careful, but it didn't say that if you're in the same continent as this, it'll kill you. It didn't have warnings quite that dire. But I found that it didn't harden enough to sand. And so when I tried to sand it, it just peeled off, stayed gummy. And then I tried auto body putty, which I have used in the past with success, but for some reason, this formulation of it dissolved this particular plastic. And so it filled the hole, but marred the surface all around it. And that kind of missed the point. So then I ended up using spackling compound, of all things, the kind of stuff you use to patch a hole in the wall. And that dries nicely enough to sand, but the surface is always a little bit porous. And so the areas that are filled in, once they're painted, those will still show as a variation in surface texture. So far, nothing has been working. Okay, so this fits in like that with a very inauthentic little divot and thing. So this is one of those things where if someone were like a super duper master modeler, right? Beyond belief master modeler, because of this, see that? Okay. This would get filled in right there. And then sanded down so that the surface here and here were, you wouldn't see that. It would just be a continuous circle. And, I'm almost tempted to do that. Why not? Why not spend a huge amount of time on something tiny like that just because it shouldn't be there? It's really disconcerting. I wonder how much that's going to show. Let's find out. That fits on there pretty nicely. There's a little bump there that I can see. This is actually kind of a surprise that this actually, I guess it doesn't. Nice. I think this is actually, once it's all painted, is cemented on. And then I would fill that in. This is going to be hand painted, so after I fill that and sand it, I can paint this. It's acting like it only fits in one way. When I first put it on, it just sat Sat in there really nicely, but now it's not. I'm not quite sure what's going on. This is supposed to be the hatch. I think the hatch goes on like this. Yeah. Well, this is just not. It's just not right. Is that supposed to go in there? So as I'm messing around with this, the there we go. That's why there's that little divot there. There's a thing here. That's another one of those inauthentic bits. And when that goes on there like that, then this can only fit one way over the top of that. It can't be right, though. I'm going to have to look at the assembly instructions. This is weird. This is the hatch through which the astronauts it docks. This is the docking hatch that docks with the LEM, and then this cone fits over this, but it has to go past it. I think it's supposed to go past it because this is removable, and then there's a little nose cone thing that goes over the hatch. Okay, well, it's a mystery so far, because this definitely is supposed to go on like this. Can it rotate? There's no hint on the inside of this that there's any particular orientation it has to follow, but sometimes it sets really nicely on there and sometimes it doesn't. There, now it does. Very limited rotation. I don't understand quite what the deal is. Why it would only work in one orientation. Okay, well, let's just say that the test fitting says that I need to figure this out because it's not coming together very well. There was a spot on here that was still showing. Now, I'm going to worry away at that with this really fine sandpaper for just a bit. See if I can't minimize the amount of that is showing. And then and I'll move on to another piece until I get the pieces that I need to test fit all of that to try to figure out how that's supposed to go. So I don't feel like talking about whether Tom Terrific is the greatest hero ever or not. It was kind of fun, a week or so, a couple of weeks ago, but I'm done with that now. I already talked about, the space race and what the perception of the space race was as a preteen, actually. It was what? when the first satellite was launched, what, in 1957, I think. I can say that I was a real fan of the Atlas rocket. For some reason, I really liked the Atlas. Just it, it was not very big or very powerful compared to things now, but it had these little side motors on it for a reason I don't recall. I think just to keep it in the right attitude as it was launched. This piece is a hatch, is the docking hatch. It docks. It connects the command module to the lunar module, and is also the thing through which the astronauts crawl. They force their way through this tiny little opening between the two. Is kind of a mess. On a big piece, when there's significant flaws in the injection molding, it's one thing. And you get these little pieces and you look at them and say there's hardly even any opportunity to get it wrong here because they're so small. And find out that the injection molders certainly are able to screw it up. Okay, that's cleaned up enough that it's starting to be identifiable. There, that will definitely get in the way of the fit of the parts. Thing like that, the file is necessary because it can get into the angle. This hatch has just a whole lot of components to it. But the one on the lunar module, I just painted a solid silver color, a dark silver. Pure aluminium, dark aluminum. I'm not sure which one it was. Might mess around with this a little bit to give it some more detail, even if it's not authentic, just to show it off. And then there's this. And then there's that. Just a messy thing. There it is. That's where it was attached. Right here is where it was attached to the tree. And that's the excess plastic bit there. So I don't want to talk about Underdog. There were a bunch of cartoon superhero types back then that were all pretty clever. Underdog was fun. He had a girlfriend, Sweet Polly Purebred. Sweet Polly Pure Heart? Why can't I remember that? They all had really good theme songs too. which I think, they were not only catchy theme songs, which were fun to sing along back in the day when I remember what they were. I remember Tom Terrific's song, but I don't remember Underdogs. Super Chicken had a pretty good one. It was something like, when you think that you're in danger, if you think that you might take a lickin', call on Super Chicken. I'm going to repeat it, the Barack Chicken sound. I especially remember Super Chicken because there's always sort of a catchphrase or a running joke, right? And Super Chickens, I still use it to this day, much to the annoyance of the people around me, is his butler, I think, was a dog. I'm not sure. Why am I not remembering this? You just use your supervision. To which Super Chicken replied, if I had any supervision, I wouldn't be in this mess. I thought that was hilarious. Nobody else does anymore. I think the people who wrote it thought it was hilarious, so I have to agree with them. It's my contribution to that. Super Chicken got his secret powers from his superpowers from his secret sauce. His secret sauce was always mixed fresh for him and served in a martini glass with an olive. That would probably be considered to be inappropriate now. It was definitely not just a martini, even though it was mixed like a martini, served in a martini glass with an olive like a martini. But no, don't do that anymore. Those were the days of innocence, right? So speaking of that, if you watch television from the 50s and 60s, alcohol was much more omnipresent than it is now. The if you went into a white collar office of someone who was kind of like C-suite, right? They usually had a whole bar there with glasses and liquor and stuff. That was just a commonplace thing. And it wasn't just on TV, it was actually real. I discovered that once when I was visiting an auto manufacturing plant. Then we went to the office of the plant manager. It wasn't the office of the plant manager anymore. Things had become much more egalitarian. But at the time that this office was constructed, it was like a 3-room suite. There was a private bathroom, a meeting area, and an office area with a big desk. It was all wood paneled. Okay. And in the area with the desk, it had a bar. That was part of it. Okay. Look at the instructions. As I'm sanding these down, I want to see how they fit. And I'm not getting a clear idea of how this is supposed to go together. Uh, then this is supposed to, it has to go. Yeah, okay, it does. Huh. Now that I've cleaned up that part, because this is supposed to, this comes off in order to allow the parachutes to be released. Oh boy, the instructions are so totally not clear. About what's supposed to be cemented and what's not. So it's pretty clear here, if you look at it, no glue between the little cone that's still in the box, that little cone, which covers up the top of this. And it makes sense that that would not be cemented on, because after this is launched, okay, so this goes on there. This goes over that. Okay. That's down. So the cone that goes over this has to come off in order to expose the docking hatch. Okay. Docking hatch is not cemented to this because this has to come off. This cowling here has to come off in order to release the parachutes. But then there's a no cement thing here, but the parachute thing has to be cemented on, because that does not ever come off. That's what I mean. The parachutes hold it on. And I think the hatch has to stay on as well. So I don't know what they're saying not to cement there. So this is clear, and this is clear. There's nice little lines saying where not to put the cement. But here is just a no glue thing. What? Maybe this is clear. Okay. Cement. Okay, you do use to cement 28 to 29, which is the hatch to the parachute thing. And you do cement these on. I knew that. 10 is the big bit. Okay. So you cement that to that to that. That makes sense. And you cement 10 to 8, which is the base. And you don't cement 31 to 30. So that is just like what? It's just confusing. It says don't cement the decal on. That's what that's supposed to be. Don't cement the decal. Funny. Huh. Okay. So I take this apart. This gets cemented on, which makes sense because the parachutes need to be attached to the cap. I am going to take some time to fill that gap in. Okay, I'm going to do that. And then this does get cemented to the top of this, which does make sense because you don't want the hatch. Don't want the hatch coming off the thing, leaving a gaping hole in the although it does leave a gaping hole. Look at that. What are they thinking? Okay. I'm Okay, so this is on here. This is intentionally, there's an intentional divot here on both sides. Okay, like a design feature of some sort. But when this is cemented on like that, and look at how badly it fits. It just wiggles all over the place, right? Which is a problem. Well, kind of. It isn't a huge problem, but it leaves that gap. See that? I don't know if you can see it there, right here. It leaves a big gap on either side, in addition to where the tab goes in. So after this is cemented together, I'm going to fill all that in. This whole part from here up is going to be hand painted anyway, so I can get the detail on the parachutes and stuff and the hatch. So I'm going to fill that in too, because that would be fatal. Okay, if that actually were there, is that gap actually were there between the docking hatch and the parachute bit, and well, maybe not, because actually the inside of this would be sealed in some way. But I'm just going to take some time to actually fill that in and sand it down. And in this particular case up here, the spacking compound will be fine, because it's such a small spot in an inconspicuous area that the difference in the texture won't be very obvious. Here, the difference in the texture will be obvious, but I think the little textural difference will be less obvious than that big gap. And that will show when this model is put into operation, because as part of the feature, this is supposed to come off. Okay, well, thanks for bearing with me as I talked my way through that, as I tried to figure out what in the heck was going on. Okay, I'm glad I ran my nail over that. Could really hardly see it, but it's right here. So these parts are okay. Right at the top of the hatch, right there, is one of those circle things I kept talking about. In this case, it's a semicircle, because it hits the edge here, but it's a raised, there's one on this side too. It's raised up, and it shouldn't be there. And those are very obvious, very visible spots. Well, this is pretty good. I'm moving along incredibly slowly, getting practically nothing done over a large period of time. So this is becoming a very typical relaxing painting stream. I'm just going to rub it like this on a flat surface to get rid of those circular flaws. By rubbing the whole thing on a flat surface like that, I should end up with just a flat surface. I can't feel that one anymore. They seem to be gone. So the hatch is going to be closed. Okay. And so I'm just going to paint it a metallic color to represent the hatch. And I'll just paint the whole thing that color. But again, what I'm going to be doing is, since this fits in here so relatively poorly and leaves big gaps like that. I'm going to fill those in before it's the final painting. And then this part, even if this moves around a little because it's not precise, it moves almost like an eighth of an inch. It's a really large movement. This just goes down over it. Why they put tabs on there, I don't know. Yeah, it sits below the surface of it. And then it comes off and is jettisoned before the parachutes are deployed. Okay, well, I'm glad I was doing all the test fitting because otherwise it just stopped making sense. It just wasn't making sense at all about how it was done. And it's given me some ideas of what I need to do to paint this. Okay. And there some ideas anyway. I think I'm going to paint this whole thing before I assemble this. Then I'm going to fill that in, probably use some tape on here so that the filler doesn't get on the painted surface. I'm going to paint this edge, the top edge here, that, well, pearlescent white like the outside already is. And then this rim around the base of the parachutes, I'll paint some other color, some structural color, like it. Maybe some metallic on these bits here, like control surfaces and so on. Like I said, I might try to find a picture of what this is supposed to look like. Guess I'll move on to this. This is kind of a mess. There's 3 areas here where there's big chunks of plastic hanging on. There's like a ridge here for a reason I don't understand. This I'm not going to fill in. I can't because that's also the alignment marker for this attachment. But I clean this up and then see if it fits. So this actually wraps around the outside of the heat shield. And then there are windows that go in here, 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 and here, and then the hatch, the access door hatch. And those are not molded with clear plastic like in most models, like canopies on the planes and stuff. They're not. They're to be cut out of clear plastic material, which is, in fact, I used a takeout container lid for the lunar module, but these are the window patterns for these windows. And I just will be honest, just as they were for the lunar module, these patterns don't fit. I can look at it right now and tell you that this is too big for that. These don't matter too much because you can't, even if you look in through the hatch in every direction, you can kind of see it. The window edges actually had a brown frame on them. These don't matter too much. You can't see those from the outside, but you can kind of see these. Anyway, I'm going to use the window pattern, not this. I'm not going to cut this out. I made a copy of this. Do some test cuts on excess takeout container lids and see if they fit. These are not too critical. These are. this is very critical because the hatch opens and the window is supposed to go in the, there's a little circular thing on the window on the hatch, and there's hatch detail that needs to be painted. So yeah, as I'm doing this, I need to look in. At some point, I'll need to decide what to do about. No, those are features. Okay. I think these are features, and that's a lump. But I don't know if that's going to show. I think that goes behind the instrument panels and will be invisible. I'm just saying I think that that's the case. I'm not sure. So this stuff just scrapes off with a fingernail. At least that's can kind of tell where it is. I'll be spending the next half hour just cleaning this up, and then I'll start working on some of the interior parts. So as I frequently have said, frequently enough that I'll continue saying it, I'm definitely not a master modeler. I just kind of, I built models when I was a kid and then stopped building them pretty much after like junior year of high school. I would build more complicated things as I got older, but I never really, as a preteen and teen, never like looked up modeling techniques. Like I would build Ed Big Daddy Roth Fink models, and there'd be gaps in the seams, right? Where the seams didn't fit quite right. And I started building those when I was a freshman and sophomore in high school. So I was a little bit older than when I would build airplane models and just come out of the box, glue everything together, finish it all within an hour or two, right? Sometimes over, if it said, hold these parts and do it overnight. Sometimes it'd take a couple of days because I didn't get impatient and I actually wrapped rubber bands around the two halves of the fuselage for the cement to set, that kind of thing. It felt like I finished them in a couple of hours, but they, and there was cement everywhere and their fingerprints on it, but they looked like airplanes when they were done. Well, when I built at Big Daddy Roth Fink models, I said, I want these to look pretty nice. And so I didn't have anything to fill in the gaps in the seams. And so I would just build up paint in them. So I essentially used paint as a gap filler. And it worked pretty well. I even wanted to match the color that was on the box top. So I would mix my paint. I would mix colors. I'd get colors that were fairly close to what I wanted, and then mix my colors. And I did it. I have to say that was one thing I did learn to do pretty well. Is I was really good at mixing colors to match the box top. The only paints then were testers enamels. Everything was glossy, except you could get flats, but flat paints were not the standard. The glossy was, and the flats were kind of special. But anyway, so it was all painted with that, and I was very careful, as careful as I could be, given what I knew I was doing and the size of the brushes that I had, and getting the edges of things nicely painted and all. They were the best models I ever built, and my mother hated them. And as soon as I left for college, they disappeared. But they reissued them back in the 90s, I think. And I bought all the reissues with the intent of actually rebuilding them. I built one. I actually finished it. It was the first model I finished on this stream because I had already started it, and then it sat around for years being unfinished. It came out pretty well, but there apparently is not like an Ed Big Daddy Roth Fink fan club out there. Maybe if I did another one, some people are watching this stream now, that they would be interested in seeing one of those. But anyway, that's where I learned how to do seam filling, or why it was even a thing. So that was a digression to explain that this is not a master modeler class. It's just me trying to make things look, pretty good. And part of making it look pretty good is to not have lumps of plastic hanging out on the outside of your command module. Okay, there's way too much plastic there. I'm going to saw off more of it. This is my one expensive modeling tool that I ever bought. It's a micro saw, which is really good for doing things like cutting off chunks of plastic like that without having them break off into the model and create a divot. So the level of modeling I'm doing here is like somewhat advanced amateur, maybe. If what you do is you want your models to look pretty good, but you're not going to be charging hundreds of dollars for display models, that you can look at under bright light with a microscope and say, wow, that's amazing. If you're not buying aftermarket parts so that your model ends up looking much more authentic than the kit that you bought, if you're not doing that kind of thing, that's the kind of level that I'm doing. And so, if you're watching this and you haven't really done modeling before, there's a few things like, sanding down the extra plastic. So I could say pretty safely that if I were building this model when I was 11 years old, I might take a razor blade and kind of scrape around the edges. I might have done that, a single-edged razor blade. The 800 stuff. No, 600 stuff. I'm going to cut off a fresh piece here. This is the only pair of scissors I can reach from where I am, so I'm using this little bitty baby scissors that exists for a reason I have no idea why. I have no idea where I got it from or why it's around, but it's kind of cute. And it'll cut sandpaper. So yeah, if I were like 11 years old, this would have been all glued together by now and maybe roughly painted. But as it is, I'm sitting here looking at the edge going, oh, this is very poorly done. I should clean this up. Gently sand off the edges. I would have cut off these things cut off from the sprue with a tree with a edged razor blade, probably. and then just scrape that off. I must have gotten it off somehow. More often than not, it broke off into the model, so there was a little bit of a divot, and well, if there was, there was. That's the way it was. But now, instead of making a C- quality model, I'm trying to make a B+ quality model, and kind of succeeding. I think the lunar module descent stage actually was definitely a B+. It came out really well because of I did more gold foil wrapping than the instructions called for, to make it look a little bit more like the real lunar module. The cement now is much better. Well, in some ways it's better, in some ways not. Back in the day, all I had was tube cement, which you can still buy, and it dissolved the plastic, forming a weld, and so once that's set, it was very strong. It was almost stronger than the plastic itself, as welds sometimes are. Polishing this a little bit because it's going to be showing on the outside and it's going to be painted white. So, why is there a dark spot? Who knows? So the thing about the tube cement was that it was viscous. I mean, very viscous, jelly-like, and would squeeze it out of the tube, and it was no matter how small you made the pinhole at the end of the tube, it just came out as a blob. So you have this blob of very viscous cement that would dissolve any plastic it came in contact with. So pick some up on the end of a pin, usually. Okay. Just the end of a pin, and it would spider web. So you pick up this blob of cement, a little bit on the end of a pinpoint, and then it would just have this tendril, this string. I'd call it spider webbing because it was a lot like a spider web. This edge is so crappy and uneven. And anyway, I need to, when I fit it, hopefully it won't look bad. Yeah. So then spiderwebby stuff would be hanging there, and kind of get it out of the way with your fingers. So then there was cement on your finger. My finger. There'd be cement on my finger, and I've had a pin point or a toothpick point full of this cement, and try to sparingly spread it around on the contact surface of the model, like one half of the fuselage or the base of a wing or something. And it inevitably got on the surface at some point. So there were always marks on it. Not surprisingly, there would be spots where it was on my finger and I'd touch the model and there'd be a permanent imprint of a fingerprint on the model. But yeah, the tube cement was really hard to work with. And now they have these liquid cements that either come with a little brush, like this comes with a little brush on the inside, and this comes with a pinpoint applicator. Neither of which dissolve the plastic quite the way the old stuff did. I just have to say that it just doesn't. I mean, it sort of does, but not as aggressively. And it's called one of them is called Contact, and I think they actually are. I found that almost need to put it on both surfaces and treat it like a contact cement, and then it holds better. Hold on, I'm having a call. Okay, I need to take this, so I'm going to take a break right now. Be back in a bit. Well, that was an unexpected interruption, but I needed to take a call, and that was. I guess I'll make that my official break, or at least most of it. Maybe I'll end a little early or something, depending on how bodily functions respond. I'll just put it that way. So I'm just continuing the tediously slow process of sanding down flaws in the mainly due to molding problems, not mold like in green or black growing stuff, but like the injection molding process. And I can tell you for a fact that if I can see them under this light, that once this is painted, the issue will be very obvious. So I'm trying to clear it up as much as I can. The edge of this, there's just so many inconsistencies in the model as it was molded, that I'm doing my best to try to get rid of them, and still, not taking an inordinate amount of time. If I were to try to sell this model once it was completed for, $900 or $1,000 or something, given the amount of time that goes into it, some absurd amount of money, I'd be doing even more than I am now. But what I'm trying to do is make it look reasonably good at a reasonable cost in terms of time. So anyway, I needed to take that call, so I took a break then to do that, and it was actually shorter than usual. Yay. But now I'm back to getting these parts presentable. And, there's this tiny little tab of plastic. You can just barely see it. Probably you can't really even see it, but I can. And, just, if you were looking at the model, even under indirect lighting from a minimum of 18 inches away, which is my recommended display arrangement, given the quality of the work here, it would be very obvious. And so it has to go. Somebody whose hand was maybe a little steadier than mine, maybe just a little more skilled, this could be done with a more aggressive grit on the sandpaper, and it would go a little faster. But I end up leaving scratches on the surface, or just abrasion marks from the coarser grit. And sanding those out takes almost more time than doing it this way. So you'll have to bear with me as I try to make these little flaws if not totally disappeared, at least scarcely visible. Yeah, I went quiet there because I was just relaxing sanding, sort of. At least this is a lot more relaxing than working with the landing struts on the LEM. That, I have to say, was definitely not relaxing, and some of those parts were terrible. They're little struts, right? Little long pieces of plastic, and the injection molding process was such that um, the mold was on either side. Okay, they weren't extruded or anything like that. They they were molded, and then it was one thing if a little bit of plastic seeped through the gaps between the two halves of the mold. That was, I mean, that was fine. That's easy to just even scrape off with your fingernail almost. But what the reality was that sometimes the two halves of the molds were misaligned. And this has happened in other models, especially with little pieces. And so you have this thing that's supposed to look like a metal strut, basically a rod, and the two halves were misaligned, and so on either side there's just this ridge. But the ridge went one way on one side and one way on the other side. And so getting rid of those ridges thinned the piece significantly, making it yet even weaker. And it wasn't that bad that it became elliptical rather than round in cross section. It could kind of live with that, but it became thinner and so more brittle. So some of the parts I didn't sand that far. It was too much of a risk. Okay, let me see how this piece fits now. Little notch that matches up with this little tab. And the point of that is so that the hatch is oriented. If you can see through the hatch, there's like three things there. That's where the feet of the couches go. Yeah, once this is cemented on, this is going to take some adjusting because it doesn't fit all that well. I'm really torn about how to do this. I want the heat shield to be painted a slightly different color than the rest of this, but it's also, and it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of a seam show like that, as long as it's enclosed, but that you can see a seam because they are different materials. But the parts don't line up. They're not like the same diameter. Seriously, they're not. Okay. Looks like the capsule is maybe a little bigger than the heat shield. And it's not like there's a lot of give in this. You can't, if you squeeze it this way, you can see squeezing it that way just bulges out there. So I'm not sure really what to do about that. If I if I cemented these together beforehand, I would go around, I get this to fit as closely as I could, and then I would go around and basically sand it off all the way around. But I wanted the heat shield to be a different color than the rest of it, and maybe I'll just have to give up on that. Okay. What I was hoping to do was I was hoping to paint this whole thing inside and out, install the windows, okay, and just attach it. But if I have to mess around with the seam between the two parts in order to make it look presentable, I have to cement this together and mask the windows. It's not impossible to do. I've done that before. Mask the windows. It's just a real pain. They're real tiny. This just really is annoying. You so if I get the front of this to look kind of okay, and I go to the back and it just doesn't look okay. I'm going to have to give this some thought about how okay and in what way is it not okay. Okay. And I'm thinking if I'm thinking I could probably manipulate this so that it looks okay if I attach this later. But I don't know. It just doesn't fit. I can get like 80% of it, but then it bulges out in the back. How can they make these parts not work? Putting it in place in the front. And it just doesn't fit. I mean, it's off by, it's a noticeable amount. It's like a 64th of an inch. You can see it. You can see, like when I push it around to fit, that it bulges out. And that can be sanded down without messing it up. Okay, because there's kind of a flat edge on the top of the command module here that if it overhangs all the way around, I can sand down the overhang. You can sand down the overhang so that it just looks like a flat surface against a flat surface, which would be okay. But then it's a question of what to do about the painting. So if I, great, and then there's a gap there, that's really good, right? So this thing is, why is there this little overhang here? I don't know. How does that not burn off when it comes through the atmosphere? and the heat shield is ablating away. How does that not burn off? And why is there a gap there? When you look at it from the bottom. Um, I think what I'm going to have to end up doing is cement this on as well as I can, given that it doesn't fit very well and it kind of flops around, knowing that there's just this discontinuity all around. Okay. Minimize that. And then, like this is about as minimized as it can get. And then hopefully the gap there will close when there's enough cement on it, and just have the cement ooze out a little bit, fill the gap. It's not a lot of plastic there either, so that if I sand it down, I could just sand right through it. Wow, I am really disappointed in this particular bit. And I can't even clamp it. There's no way to, I guess rubber bands maybe to hold it together while it's setting. Yeah, just like fiddling with this, trying to get it to not look bad. Be Maybe I can get away with it. I don't know. But I'm thinking the more I'm playing with this and the more I'm seeing that it just doesn't fit very well, um, the more I'm being convinced that I'm going to have to just put it on as well as I can and then sand it down so that there isn't just this nasty, gaps and things. And then paint the whole thing the white color, okay, after this is put on. But this is put on after the interior is completed. That's why I was really hoping it would fit, is that the entire interior is finished. All of that, okay, all completed. Uh, and then this just goes over the top after all of that is installed. And if this fit nicely, it would just go over the top. The windows would be in, the door would be installed, and that would be that. But if it doesn't, and I have to paint this after instead of before, so that was the nice thing about painting the heat shield a slightly different color, is that this would just go on. If it doesn't fit, then you've got cement oozing and messing up the paint. Wow. Um, yeah, this is just going to be a challenge. This is as good as it gets, and maybe I will just have to live with it, because the not painting this until it's put together, okay, means, and it's not impossible, but I'd have to mask the windows. Fine, little tiny bits of masking tape that I can put on there before this put on, so I can hold them from the back while I'm masking it. I did that with the lunar module. I'd have to mask the door, mask the top, hope that no paint infiltrates. Okay, the way I am holding it now, is as good as it gets, and it's not great. Okay, but the task of I'm just going to live with that. because I want to be able to have this painted before I install it. And I'll be wearing gloves and things so I don't rub the paint off. But I can paint this before I install the windows, and then there's not an issue of masking at all. I want to paint these little attitude control nozzles, okay? And those are tiny little bits of black paint, and I can do that and touch them up if necessary. Or, you know, it would be really good, what would be really neat is if I just had a whole lot of tiny little circles like that, and I could paint these black and then mask over them when I painted it white. I think, you know, they didn't. I'm going to look at, before I do all of that, I'm going to look at the box top. I don't think they painted those. Okay, I have decided that the poor fit between the capsule and the heat shield is just something that I'll have to live with. It'll just have, even though there's a big gap, okay? There's a visible gap here that it's as good as it's going to get, but the risks involved in putting this together, and I might rethink this, putting this all together, getting the masking all done right, getting the masking off, okay? And what I mean by, well, it's still possible to replace the window through the top, I guess, but I don't know how the detail inside is going to allow that to happen. But that the risks of putting this together, cleaning up the seam, and then painting it are really pretty high. Given that the interior has to all be done before the top goes on. You know, if I could put this together and then build the interior, that wouldn't be so bad, because I can, you know, I can mask this from the inside. I could put the windows in later. But if this is all filled with stuff, you know, I can't get my fingers in there, right? So part of it will be how the rest of this fits together. And then part of it will just be living with a really, really bad fit and finish between the capsule and the heat shield, because that is just the way it is going to have to be. Well, that was very disappointing. Seriously, disappointing. Okay. The next bits are the control panel. This ends up fitting here, and these wings end up fitting here and here. This is another thing. Okay, I mean, it looks like it goes together pretty easily, right? And it does, sort of. But then you end up with that. Okay, you end up with these gaps. And you're not going to see this. Well, actually, you are. Because when this goes over, oh no, it's enclosed. This is on here and the hatch is on here. Okay, never mind. You're not going to see this, so that's okay. You just have to be concerned about how it looks from the inside, and that's how it looks from the inside. Is there's gaps, you know, instrument panel. Hold that together for just a moment and show you that how this works. This is kind of weird. The these are the seats. So after that is put together, somehow this is supposed to be inserted here and it drops down onto these ledges, which I can't see there, like that. Okay. So it's important to do this just to show you how it fits, and for me to see what shows and what doesn't show. Yeah, so this goes in like that, and you can see that there's a space behind their couches, which is like you can then see through the hatch the conduits and all that other kind of stuff that's on there. I'm going to look at those. It looks like there's like little control things on there too. Anyway, so if that holds together, okay, then you can see the instrument panel back there, and that's where we're going to try to get a stick-on thing to make it look like an instrument panel. And this, I still don't know how this is supposed to fit. Okay, this goes over their heads somehow. And no matter how I mess with this or manipulate it, it never makes sense. I'm thinking, of course, I can't hold it, right? Do the tabs, I think the tabs go on the inside. It kind of fits on that side, but this, yeah. So they either go on the inside or the outside, and as it is, one goes on one and one goes on the other because that's how. Oh yeah. So if this is all cemented together and isn't movable, that's good. It has to go on the outside somehow. Yeah, I've tried this several times and have yet to figure out how this is supposed to fit. And I definitely want to get it to fit before, this is now cemented together, right? It's now immobile. And then this thing is supposed to somehow hang over their face, their head. Yep. Sorry about that. I'm just messing with it and I'm just trying to figure out how that goes. So I've tried that before, tried to get that to fit before, and it hasn't. So, yeah, so that's terribly disappointing about how this doesn't fit on that, and the options are not good. Well, let me try to get the chair fixed. There's just extra plastic that's sticking out all over the place here. Now, maybe it is good that I say this to the end. You look at the instructions, and the assembly of this looks just so straightforward. They're fairly large pieces, right? There's no little tiny. There's only two little tiny pieces. It looks like just round on round that it should be like. It should be really easy, and it's just not. Largely because the pieces just don't fit. And unfortunately, two of the pieces that don't fit are the most obvious. They're the heat shield and the capsule itself. Maybe I can just leave the hatch permanently closed and don't bother with the inside. That would be a cheap way out, wouldn't it? Okay, well, I got to, instead of talking about Super Chicken or Underdog or other cartoon heroic figures, I got to complain loudly and persistently about things not fitting together. I just thought, this goes on there. Boom. I mean, what could be more what could be easier than this fitting? Why doesn't it fit? Well, I mean, it looks like it does, kind of, but then it doesn't. Well, I don't know what that is, so I'm going to let it go to voicemail. I'm keeping my phone here because, and I know it's just annoying. It's annoying to me too, but the call I was waiting for a couple of calls that I needed to take today. Probably the dentist verifying that I'm coming in for my root canal tomorrow. Or else it's a political call. There, not surprisingly, been a large number of those coming through, and will probably continue at an ever increasing pace between now and November. Well, once I get these parts sort of finished, so that they look presentable, and this one is particularly not. They didn't even bother trying with the mold back here on the foot parts, right? Didn't even bother trying to get the two parts of the mold to fit together. I'm using the file on this instead of the sandpaper because it's just this little edge, and small parts like that don't show file marks quite the same as like on the surface of this wood. Like this little flaw right at the top there. I'll use the sandpaper on that because that would definitely show. And since I'm sanding that off, I'm just going to sand the entire surface so that it has the same surface texture. And since I'm doing one, even though it's unnecessary, I will then sand the others also so that they are equivalent. So sometimes I pay attention to just stupid levels of detail that make no difference at all, but end up taking time. I'm not a real good judge at this point about what is important and what isn't. So I am erring on the side of if it could possibly show, take care of it. Okay, well, this is the time. What is it? I've got about an hour, a little more than an hour left. The pace of progress here is pretty minimal today. Thank you for the new follow. I appreciate it. Thanks so much. Yeah, this is supposed to be a very relaxing kind of stream. I'm just kind of filing away and sanding down flaws in the mold. The plastic parts as they came out of the mold, they're just a mess. And that part's actually going okay. It's slow, because I'm trying not to break the parts or leave scratches all over them. So it's kind of slow. But then I was test fitting some things, and just so many things that are not well done on this model that will require, just to make it look not bad, to make it look kind of okay. I mean, just little things like, this has a notch in it, an alignment notch. When you put it on here, okay, I mean, great. That alignment notch is way bigger than it needs to be, but then it leaves a gap. So that's the kind of thing that I could just there see the gap there with the notch and the tab. So it's nicely aligned, but it leaves a gap. It leaves a hole. It leaves a discontinuity in the surface. So it's the kind of thing where I'm going to tape this. Once it's cemented on, I'll tape this off, okay, and fill that in, and then do a little touching up paint on it. I'll probably paint this, before I attach it, and then just touch this area up once it's filled in, rather than try to paint that edge. But the parts on these plastic models are they're not precision. There, I'll just say that. They are not precision molded. So if you get a box of a model that says precision molded plastic parts, you can be pretty sure that there's plastic parts in there and that they were molded. Okay. But I would be really cautious about believing the precision part of that claim. And I'm not trying to diss the model makers. It's just the reality of it. And it's the kind of thing that probably would look okay, with just some care, but not as much as I'm giving it. But it's stuff like this. Like you look at the headrests here, and there's just all these fleshings from where the plastic oozed out between the parts of the mold, and those just can't stay. Okay, they just can't stay because it would look terrible. And then there's these little circles. Now I'm going to test fit an astronaut to see if those circles need to be eliminated or not. There's little astronaut figures that sit inside, and they're definitely going in there, because otherwise these chairs they're not historically accurate. Okay, the real chairs were like canvas suspended on a metal framework, and that's not what these look like at all. So I'm going to get some of once I get the flashing off of the headrests, I'm assuming that's what these are, which also do not exist on the real thing, because I have a picture of the real thing from the Smithsonian. Okay. But they're there because they're just there. Well, there we have some incredibly uncomfortable looking seats into which the astronauts are supposed to sit. I suppose, one thing I could do is either later today or maybe tomorrow is I've got a lot of these parts ready to go. Everything but the instrument panel, basically. and some little bits there is that I could actually prime them. And then I could start doing some painting. Like I could try to paint this. This is the parachute sort of thing. I could paint the hatch, the docking hatch, and okay, these two parts are going to get cemented together. Then I need to fill in these gaps. So I'm thinking I might. No, it's a lot easier to paint this first because this is a different color and then put it on. But as I'm thinking this through, if I fill in that gap, okay, and then sand it down. Okay, I know what I'm going to do. You can see that this, I'm going to paint the top of this, just the top of the circle here, and maybe a little bit around it, where it dips down and around. I'm going to paint that the same color as this, like it's all part of one piece of metal. Yeah, I think that will actually work. It would look like the tunnel kind of goes around. Well, and if it doesn't work, I can always just repaint it and just try to get the lines carefully done. But I'm going to assemble this first before I even prime it and fill in the gaps and sand those down so that when it's primed and painted, they will not show very much. And then I can paint all of that because I want to paint some of the detail on here, not just paint it brown. Okay, so I can do that. This will get painted. This is all painted a different color. It gets set in here. And like I said, this will already be painted, but I can tape this over so that I don't mess up the paint when I fill that in and sand it. And I can just touch up a little bit of that. This will all be brush painted. The assembly instructions are not helpful in terms of painting. It just says, paint that brown. I don't even know what color this is supposed to be painted. And I could look. What do they think? I'm curious now. What color do they think it should be painted? If at all. Yeah, there are no painting instructions at all. What? It doesn't make sense. That's the sound I make when I just go, what? My family is used to it. What's wrong now? Will come the response. They won't say it like that. That's not the tone of voice they use. That wasn't fair. What's wrong now? They say in a somewhat concerned and annoyed fashion. What's wrong now is that whoever made this model didn't make it with the intent of it being a major display item. It's meant to be looked at from like 3 feet away, not 2. Oh, here. I didn't even have to go off screen to get them. Here's the little sitting down astronaut guys. Let's put them in their little sitting down chair. There they go. Mm-hmm. Extremely hyper realistic little astronaut guys. And the way they're going to be seen is, you can see them here, is that this will go over it like that. Be able to look in through the hatch when the hatch is open and see them sitting there in their astronaut couches. Okay, well, the good thing about this is that most of you can't see most of the seat, which is fine because it's not a very good thing. The really good thing about it is that the these circles, and you can see one here, it's marked, are covered up by their helmets. That's good because I didn't really want to be spending a lot of time sanding those out. I'm gonna give it a little bit of rub here. I don't know why I'm bothering. That's going to get painted over. Okay, I think I can prime this. To assemble this and fill in the gaps before I prime it and paint it. Given how I'm planning to paint this, given that when it's attached, okay, it would look as though part of the. Well, I can probably get that line painted freehand without a real problem. But the gap left by that tab is kind of dumb. The gaps on either side are annoying. I'm going to not. I'm not going to mess with the instrument panel right yet. I'm going to do a few other things first. Yeah, I know that this has to be cemented on. I'm going to double check that with the instructions, and I'm going to do that. And I'm actually going to fill this stuff in, so I can prime this. I can prime this. I can prime these bits. I actually can prime this too. Okay. The inside is painted light blue. The outside is painted pearlescent white. But I haven't completely decided yet. Whether I'm just going to build the entire interior, run cement all around the edges, line up the tab with the tab, set it on there, and say, that's good. Because it doesn't fit very well. And I could make it look a lot better. But the risk of doing that, I don't think is worth the risk. So I'm going to just prime all this stuff. Why not? This one too. Yeah, I can prime all these things, and then I can actually begin. A lot of these will be spray painted, like this will be spray painted a tan color. Kind of an off yellowish white to represent the canvas. The heat shield, I'm going to do I think I'm going to use the insignia white. It's kind of a grayish color that I've used. I need to check. I'm muttering to myself, oh yeah, I need to make a decision about the inside of this. Not before I prime it, but before I actually start painting it. Good grief. Okay, so this is mainly painted blue, and then there's all these metallic things all over it that have even additional stuff on them, like little detail stuff. And a lot of this will be visible through the hatch. Okay, you'll be able to see it once this is put on. Okay, the seats are up here, but you'll be able to look down and see a fair amount of that under the seats. So I'm going to take the time to paint it, even if it ends up being invisible. But one thing I wanted to check, I was going to do this during break, but then the break became a phone call. So I'll be right back. I have to check some things. Here, I'm looking through some boxes of stuff, moving things around that shouldn't be where they are. They're really in the way. Mess of stuff. Trying to check a color. And I'm trying to get a color right. I'm just gonna grab this box. There. Clean this up later. Okay. I'm grabbing three things. Among the things I'm grabbing, okay, this is my test of the blue. I had this light blue color and this it's called ghost gray. And this is the color I'm going to be using for the inside of the capsule and for the instrument panels. This is the color that's getting used for the astronaut seats, which comes close to matching the canvas. Looks like canvas on the picture of the capsule. This is the outside white color. What I'm looking for is, okay, never mind. I have sort of a greenish color. These are the fairings. This is where the lunar module, you can't even see it. It's just so big. That's why I'm keeping it aside. This is the lunar module sits in this. Those fold up around it, and then the service module sits on the top of these after they're put on with a hinge. I kept thinking I was using a different color for that, but I forgot all about the kind of greenish gray color that I was using for the insides of stuff. And I'm glad I did, because got to set it somewhere. I'm going to use this for the heat shield, just to differentiate it from the outside of the rest of the capsule, because it's not the same material at all. Okay, but there's little details like the inside of this. Okay, that's an interior component, and it comes off. Okay, it's detachable from the rest of the model, because this comes off in order to expose the parachutes when this thing is landing. Okay, so I'm going to paint that the same color as the gray-green that you saw. And the same is true of the very, very top cone that goes on top of all of this, right? It apparently sits on here once it's put together. So I'm glad I checked that, because I need to be able to use that color. This is the kind of thing I do what I don't have to do. Is like, why am I doing that? Why am I painting the inside of this a different color than the outside? Well, because that's how it is. There's the real thing used kind of a metal primer for most of the insides of it, and then the outside was different. And oh my goodness, I totally missed that. Okay, as I'm looking at that, there's these molding circles all around the bottom of this piece, and I totally missed it when I was cleaning them up. And I need to take care of that by rubbing the bottom of this with some sandpaper and getting rid of those. Because even though when it's put together, you can't see them when you take it off, when it's jettisoned, okay, because this model is supposed to replicate the flight of the real Apollo. When this is jettisoned, you'll say, well, the real thing didn't have these little molding circles all over the bottom. Why does this? Okay, I'm talking to myself about colors because these pieces are getting ready to be painted. Seriously, they're getting close to doing that. And if the inside and the outside are painted different colors, then it becomes an issue of like masking and things like that. So what I would end up probably doing is I would run masking tape all around the outside of this because I don't want to get the white paint is not exactly opaque. Okay. So this is primed white. It's going to be primed white. And then if I paint this a different color, I want to mask the outside of it, right? So that I don't get overspray all over it. And then it's a simple matter of masking this off to paint that. And then this rim here will be painted that gray-green color. And that's consistent with what I've done in other parts of the model. Just to keep these things, consistent. Okay, so this gets painted sort of a yellowish color to match the seats. This is going to be painted in a multitude of different colors. This is going to be painted one color on the outside and that pearlescent on the outside and that gray-green on the inside. This is painted light blue on the whole inside. And the pearlescent on the outside. I might as well prep this bit here because the color scheme on this is going to be the same as here. And then I need to check this. I got the blue-gray out. Not the blue-gray, the light blue. And I'm trying to decide whether to paint this the light blue and then paint all the detail on it, or whether to paint the detail and then paint up to it. And the way this is visible through the hatch, once this is poorly aligned and it's the best that can happen, is that I think I'm going to try the technique of painting the whole thing blue and then painting the detail as well as I can. And if, as was likely to happen, the brush slips a little bit and I get some metallic paint onto the blue, is I have in the past with the spray paint just sprayed some in a container and touched it up. And that's been adequate for this kind of work. I'm kind of saying that because there's like these spaces in between here, just all sorts of narrow little things that need to be painted blue underneath and then paint down to it with a fine brush. So there'll be a fair amount of painting that going on here. I might even go so far as to try to paint these brackets. You can see the raised ridges of the brackets holding these conduits down. I might even paint those a different color. Just, why not? Because I can. So I made that decision. I made a decision about how it's going to go. Yay. Where is the piece that I was using? There. This is the 800 grit. And I'm very carefully just getting rid of that little nubbin there. And then I will test fit this piece to the rest of it. It almost certainly isn't going to work because nothing else has. Why would this? Okay. So this goes like this. I'm going to set it on here just so the whole thing kind of comes together. Okay. And I already have a plan for how to fix that. This part, okay, these parts are permanently attached, okay, because that's the parachute system and the docking hatch tunnel that goes from the command module to the lunar module. This comes off later to let the parachutes deploy, right? But for now, it goes over like that and it sits like that, and then this looks like this notch goes here. This is only there for launch. It's shortly after it's launched. The escape tower, which is attached here to the pins of the escape tower attached to these little holes, that launches off, and then this at some point is removed so that this can dock with the lunar module. And it's supposed to fit on there somehow. It's got prongs all around it, I think. But this one looks like it's supposed to align with this. Okay. Well, we'll try it this way. Oh, okay. It does fit. Huh. So why wasn't it fitting? You know, it's it seems to be going in. There we go. It's kind of a tight fit, which I guess sort of makes sense there. But it does fit eventually. Yeah. Well, I got it on there. Maybe I can do it this way. Maybe I can do it like this. There. Okay. Yeah. Well, I have to clean that off. There's a little nubbin. But this comes off, leaving this behind. Okay. But for some reason, even though I can get it to, even though I can get this to go in like that really quite easily, I can't get it to go on. Well, I know it goes on. Okay. So that's all that really matters. And then this sits on top like that. Okay, so I can do this and this and this and this part here that's inside. Mutter, mutter, mutter. But there's, when I put it together, there's that little bump, wherever it is, that's really obvious. I mean, it really shows. Yeah, there it is. Right, so these parts are ready for priming. I still have enough time. I'm going to, I'm trying to remember what I'm trying to do here. Attach that to that and fill in the gaps. On Friday, if I can get these pieces primed and then probably put the second color on for those that will be not hand painted. Like these will get hand painted. There's no real rush on this, but this part, if I can get this primed and then painted blue, this just sets in there. All of this will be invisible. Just the inside will be visible. If I can get this painted blue, I'll start painting the interior detail, and then I can start painting this thing too. So on Friday, I'm going to do, well, between now and then, in a well-ventilated area, not here. I can't do any spray painting here because it's not a well-ventilated area. On Friday, I'll be doing some, maybe it'll be relaxing, maybe not painting. No, this part, yeah. They just can't get the circles to fit on circles. It just doesn't happen. Okay. As I've said before, if you noticed, one of these has some black on the inside. Okay, that's really important. And I'm going to actually put a little bit more on there because the escape tower only fits on here one way. And the one that's marked black on the escape tower has to go in here. Otherwise, they don't fit. Okay, the four legs don't fit. So I'm going to get the inside of this. Good thing I'm not doing anything delicate right now because I'm not even able. Yeah, as time goes on here, as is customary, I am finding that my manual dexterity, anyway, I'm starting, things don't go where they're supposed to with my fingers. And what I am actually going to do is, I was thinking, how will I, when I paint this, how will I keep it from getting, painted over so that the black inside doesn't show? And then I thought, well, I'll stick a little piece of toothpick in there. But then I thought, well, I'll do it with all of these, because if those holes get filled up, then the escape tower isn't going to fit. Think of, what needs to happen first. And this is not needing to happen first. This is needing to happen first. This needs to be cemented on, and then the gaps filled in really soon. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to work on priming and painting this. Well, okay. This is going to get painted. This is the hatch. This is supposed to go in here. These pins are actually supposed to go in these little holes, and it's supposed to open. And that's supposed to happen without breaking those pins off. Mm-hmm. Yep, you betcha. I'm beginning to think that what's going to happen here is that I think that the way this is supposed to work is like one of those things where the top pin goes in further, then you put the bottom pin in, and then it settles. But yeah. So neither the hatch opening, as I'm looking at it, nor the hatch are very good. I'm going to cement this in and then fill in the cracks before the stream is over. But I don't think. Well, it'll dry. I'm gonna sand those down before I prime it, but it'll be off screen, just to keep things moving. But and I need to finish this in my hatch. Sorry, this time of the stream things start going. There's a little bit of detail on the inside of the hatch here. You can see there's some little mechanisms. The real hatch is much more complicated, and but at least I'll do some work on this. I'll paint the inside light blue and then do metallics on the raised surfaces. And there's two of those circles there that aren't supposed to be there. Lovely. And so I'm going to, when I get they're indented. There's not much I can do. I can't sand them out without messing up the entire door. Just put some filler in there. And then sand it down and hope that does the trick. Okay. At least I can't mess this up too much in terms of getting this cemented on. Just need to double check where the contact surfaces are. I think I'm going to try putting the cement only on one side and not on both sides. Surfaces, one surface and not both surfaces, is what I meant to say. I really like it after about 12:30 when I start becoming incoherent. I start dropping things. It's just way more entertaining, I'm sure, for everybody. I'm going to do my best to try to center this because it does not fit very well. Well, it's holding pretty well. Cement is holding well. Symmetric. I mean, pretty symmetric. Seam there, but that's probably the way it needs to be. All right, what I can do now is I can let this set for like 20 minutes or so before I put any filler on it. That'll give it time to settle in. And what I'm talking about is that, see the gap there? There's one on the other side, and then there's where the tab went in. And there's a gap there. I'm going to do my best to try to make those disappear. Okay. And then I'll just trust my ability to maneuver a brush to get the different colors painted, the different parts painted the appropriate colors. I think it's pretty close to being even on both sides. All right. I did a thing. Yay. Okay, I'm going to let this set and then I'll come back and do some filling in, and that will dry and I can sand it before I go on to the priming because I'd like to get as much of that done as I can and as quickly as I can. So I talked through the color scheme, and I'm kind of hoping that I remember what it was before I start painting. I know pearl white, light blue, racing white, which is slightly yellowish white for the seats, and then that grayish blue color, grayish green color for the insides of these things. And I'm trying to get the hatch to fit because, well, I don't know. It would just be a whole lot better if these things were not so messy. Have I said that before? Have I complained about the build quality, the injection molding quality of these models? I'm sure I haven't. Okay. Yeah, I need to do some masking on these before I paint the secondary color, but that's all this is going to be. I can prime these, and then on Friday, while I'm doing in between doing the detail and stuff on this, I can mask them so that I can paint one color, probably the blue gray first, because it's easy to touch up if I get white on the blue gray. It's not so easy to touch up if I get blue green gray on the white. If I get white on the green gray, I can touch it up pretty easily. If I get green gray on the white, it does not touch up easily because the white is translucent. So the white on the white primer looks just fine, but the white doesn't cover other colors very well. Okay. Yeah, that's going to sit for a bit. In the meantime, I'm going to get the door opening prepped, more or less. And then the hatch, I'll play with the hatch a little bit. Spurts, because when I put the filler on here, okay, here, and here, that comes later. Just I was thinking about the sequence of things. When I put the filler in there, I also have to put it in these little divots here on the door. And if I can't successfully fill those, I'm going to have to somehow disguise them when it's painted. To be very careful not to harm that pin, that very fragile pin that's supposedly going to hold the door in place while it opens and closes. That, which I doubt will happen. At least cleaning these edges isn't too bad. So this is going to be a multi-step process. I'll put the window in at the end. It's a little circular window that goes on there that cements onto the inside of this, and then it should have what looks like a frame around it, which will be trying to paint around it with a little bit of brown. I'll show you the real hatch in just a minute. It's much more complicated than this. So I'll be able to paint this whole thing. I'll paint the door, and then it looks like the door needs to be assembled from the inside for it to work at all. Yeah, this is where I need 4 hands. Like there's a lot of clearance around the hatch in the model. Lovely, a lot of clearance. But in doing that, it just these rough edges just become so obvious. Well, this is another reason to paint this whole thing before it's attached, even though it doesn't fit, and it has to do with the not just these windows, but also the attachment of the door, which really needs to be done largely from the inside, which can't be done once it's attached. So, yeah, that'll be interesting. So these can. Said this before. I think that people who are making display models for sale, where they make them, they get paid to make them. They're really good at it. I'm just wondering how much of the model they actually use, because sometimes it just looks like what they've done with it compared to the model itself just starts to look impossible. You can't get there from here, is the impression. So the inside of this door, the instructions say painted blue, but there are embossed little bits, like these things are supposed to be probably latches, bolts that seal it, and then there's some other little raised bits that I'm going to be painting metallic. But again, this is where the model is kind of disappointing compared to reality, in that that's the real hatch. Okay. And when you look at this, the window is way tiny compared to that. It's it should be 1.5 times this diameter. You can see that there's a frame around it. I'm going to try my best to paint the edges of the window to look like that. You can hear the locking mechanisms. You can look at this and see that there was sort of an attempt around the edges, to replicate those locking mechanisms, and some of the other things that are on there, but it's nowhere close to this. So that's what I'm going to do. This is supposed to be light blue. It's going to be light blue, not this color, because that's the color I have. And then I'll be using a really teeny little brush to paint these aluminum aluminum paint so that at least as much of the detail that they've put into the model actually shows since the hatch opens. Okay. And it's pretty clear that the edge of the hatch is painted the same color as or close to it as the inside. So when I paint this, the outside will be painted the pearlescent white, which will be almost exactly the same color as this, but the edges will be that bluish color. So masking it, I'll just initially mask around that, paint the blue on it, and then mask all around the edge, and then paint the white on up to the tape. And that's been okay. It's been successful in the past. Yeah, but the edges are not the white. You can see that. The edges of the door are not the white from the outside. And as I was saying earlier, what we're going to attempt to do here, and it will be a multiple effort, is this is the real instrument panel, where a mock-up of it. Actually, this is like used in a simulator. Pretty close to the real thing. That's the real thing. So you can see they kind of came close to it. That's in that these two things here. So this and this are the same thing. And in order to make the model look kind of decent, we're going to use a picture like this and try to Photoshop it and get it to the right size and shape to match the instrument panel chunks that we've got. And it'll require a good deal of manipulation because these parts don't match this. They just don't. And then print this and then paste it on so that the instrument panels will look more like this than nothing. Hi, thanks for joining in. Why would you not organize your homebrew notes on a world that you made? Of course you should. If you created a homebrew D&D world and you're thinking at some point in the future you might get some people to play it, put it together. And I'm speaking from experience there because I have done some things in the past and never finished them. Okay. And I've never finished them. And they're just sitting around. Sometimes they're so old that they are handwritten on paper. Sometimes they're young enough that they are like in an old version of Word sitting on a hard drive on my computer. But whenever I think about them, I just say, someday when I have time, which is you would think a kind of stupid thing to say because I'm retired and I have no obligations other than like dentist appointments and the stream. Let me help you get motivated by saying, whenever, and I know sometimes it feels like a big job when you look at it and go, oh, that's a lot of work, is just say, I'm going to take a half hour, on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays when you're listening to me meander on about something about how the model is very poorly made and the parts don't fit. Okay. You could take that opportunity to work on your notes. And then you'd be spending like an hour and a half a week, which isn't a whole lot, but you can get a lot done during that period of time. But at some point, you're going to want to play that world that you created. And then at some time you'll have some players who would be interested in it, and it would be great if you had it available and ready to go. So I'm going to strongly encourage you to do that. Okay, I'm just reading this that you've got. So the world and the town that you work in. Um, um, you know, NPCs in a game are actually more important than I think people might think. Um, oh, I see what you're saying. Is that you would actually play a character yourself and take it through the world just to see. Yeah, that's actually a good idea. Is to like do a simulation when you're really close to being ready to play. Keep in mind though that when you're playing with real people, they're not likely to behave, and they'll do things that are unexpected or sometimes even unwelcome. As a DM, just ask our DM about us. Dice, our group Midnight Brunch is famously, um, oh, forgot all about these stupid little antenna. Our group Midnight Brunch is famously um, always doing things that the DM doesn't like. Well, if they're elemental crystals, yeah, they have to do elemental things, right? I mean, what else? Oh my God, sorry. I'm just looking at these little bits. These little bits you would think were nothing, right? They attach here. They're like little antennae or something that stick on the outside. This is going to slow things down somewhat because of the nature of these little things. I wanted to, yeah, I wanted to not drop them on the floor for one thing. Is they go on the side here like this. You can just barely see it because that's what they look like little antennae, and they're supposed to attach here. And as you can see, they don't fit flush very well. Sorry. But I think the elemental crystals are pretty cool. Make them rare. Okay. Don't, and make them kind of like, you want the players to be able to stumble onto them so that they know they exist, but you don't want them to be just everywhere because then they're not fun. But this isn't, these parts, I talked about badly shaped small parts. Okay. These don't fit directly because there's stuff all over them. And of course, they've got a circle. I mean, it's not just that there's flashing all around it because the two parts of the mold didn't come together. So these little bits need to be manipulated significantly before they are attached to this, before this is painted. Fortunately, this is like one of the very last things that goes onto the model, and I think it can be done pretty independently of everything else. But I have these are going to take more time than I've got today to get them to work and to be attached. So I might do that on Friday, depending on how the rest of this goes, how the painting goes and stuff. But to let you know, I'm going to be priming this stuff. Trains. Okay, you had too many things going at once, and the players didn't know what to do. Um, no, you're not rambling. That's actually a pretty good story. You know, if the crystals in our D&D campaign, The not just in our D&D campaign, we have these things called fervent crystals, which are a power source, and there's a whole subplot about the guy named Fervin who didn't invent the crystals, but invented the way to use the crystals. And he eventually disappeared, and there was an explosion associated with his disappearance, but we don't know that he died in the explosion or not. We just don't know. It might have been like not a like a interplanar kind of event. I mean, it might have been that kind of thing. But anyway, those are a recurring theme in the show. But what we found is that they don't really play a huge role in it. So I'm just going to make the suggestion. I'm not telling you what to do. If you've got something that's always there and people are using it, all you're doing is describing it. Okay? And that might be a cool thing. Like our fervent crystals, we've accidentally blown up most of us a town by not quite understanding how they worked. Just, that wasn't a good thing. We're not proud of that. But, it provided cover for some other activity that we were doing. I'll just say that. So sometimes they can play a role. But if you've got something like those elemental crystals, which I think is a really cool idea, is that they would let your players discover them. Have them to be fairly rare. And I think I'm really making this suggestion. I think that rather than just having them be part of the description of the world and having the world become more complicated in this description, that you have an opportunity to use those crystals for your players to discover, to not know really what they are, to have them be fairly rare, and that it could be part of their development as characters. It could give them energies or access to certain, just like water or air or something. They could use it for like drinking or putting out fires or that kind of thing. But if they found the crystal and then had to discover its use, how do you make it operate and what does it do when you do that? How do you control it? Then it could actually become part of the player progression. I think I'm just suggesting that might be something to do, because I think your idea of having elemental crystals available in the game is actually pretty cool. Okay, I need to start wrapping up. Well, that can happen too, is that the crystals, like everything else, right? Everything can be good or bad. Too much of a good thing. So, running into an area, I'm just using these to plug these holes so that when I paint it, it doesn't get paint on the inside of them. I'm going to end up running over today because I want to get some of this stuff done. I'm going to plug these holes, and maybe I'll do this off camera. I don't know. I need to fill in these gaps. So I'm just going to show you how I do that. It's not the recommended way to do it, but it's what I do because it's what I can do. Sometimes I do things because that's my skill level. Okay, I'm using, of all things, spackling paste to fill these in because I just find it really easy to manipulate and sand. And for really tiny spots like that, even though it has a slight textural difference from the plastic, it's okay. I mean, it's good enough to There isn't much of it. It doesn't show. It comes out pink. I know that's kind of weird, but it dries white. You know, I I'm a huge fan of food-based D&D stuff because our characters are always looking for food, making food. Um, why not? Why not use cheese? There's nothing wrong with that at all. I think that's pretty clever. Okay, so that should fill that hole. I'm trying to keep any kind of residual sanding to a minimum by getting this stuff into where it needs to be and not where it doesn't. This is a little more challenging in here. That is a little hard to reach. It'll actually be a little hard to sand as well. So I'm sorry for not watching the chat screen. I'm trying to do this, but keep the cheese. I encourage you to keep the cheese. I wouldn't worry about the distances. Okay, so when you're playing the game, okay, your travel just can't ever be in real time. You know, it just becomes part of the description of, something is, I don't know, a 2-day journey. Just use it that way, like it's a 2-day walk. If you didn't stop along the way, kind of thing, because you never know what your players are going to do, or what you as a DM might want to do in terms of that. Maybe it'll be uneventful. Maybe you would say time passes, and you just get from one place to the other, and then it's done. Others, the 2-day journey might take a month. So I wouldn't be worried about distances so much as just as a descriptive kind of thing. You might want to describe distances, but really, the more important thing is how does it affect gameplay? And having a mode of transportation like a train is not a bad idea at all. That's a good one. Trains, we have discovered trains in our campaign. They were just invented using fervent tech. They hadn't been before, and if it's pretty clear that there's a long distance from one place to the other, if it's pretty clear that it has to be that, like you're going to a different continent or a city that is definitely not going to be like a 10-minute walk, right? Or even a couple of days. Having that kind of transport just adds, you get on a train and you go there. And yeah, that's and how you get there. And that's not bad. The train can break down. The train might stop at various places other than the ones where you're going. And those could lead to, somebody saying, I really need something from the desert. Will you as adventurers help me do this? And it gets built right in. What I wouldn't I mean, the train is kind of a cool element, and of course, there's always train robberies and train wrecks and things like that that you as a DM can put in. Um, well, this is going. I think this isn't going to even need any sanding, really. Having it be pink, I know it's weird, but some household stuff like this, like primer and this stuff, it changes color from pink. But having it be pink, I can see exactly where it is and where the excess is, and I think I've got that. You know, if you see it there, I think I've got that filled in. There's that too. I know it's been done, but murder on the train, adventure on the train, spies on the train breakdowns, train collisions. You can do a lot of stuff on and around trains, as well as just get from one place to the other. You know, a mechanism in the story that sometimes just getting from one place to the other is kind of an exciting event because it sometimes doesn't happen in D&D campaigns. Okay, I like that. So, but as far as those crystals go, I think instead of just that, you should consider, even though it's more work, somehow making them an active part of the adventure of your group. That somehow or other they're endangered by them, they discover them, they try to use them. Sometimes they try to use them and they fail. Um, that might be kind of fun. Okay, so I got those done. Now I got these stupid little circles. I really, really hate these circles that are built into the model. And if I can get these in, I have to sand them. I would very much like that. I wish I had. What I really need is a microscopic trowel. You know, how if you're really doing this kind of thing, you would. It's so shallow. You know, those things are just deep enough to be very visible, and yet not deep enough to hold the spackle. I did a harumph there. Okay, yeah. Um, you should chat with our DM about what to do in a situation like that. You know, but that happens when players get something. Sometimes they hold on to it in a way that you did not anticipate and are not happy about. Um, we have done that so many times to our DM. Okay. Well, that's one way of just saying up yours in a, there's less polite ways of saying that as well, is to just drop space whales on them. We, well, I don't know. We might steal that idea. Why not have space whales? That sounds really fun. Well, that is true. I mean, if they're misusing the monastery in terms of the way you want the game to progress, you just blow it up or burn it down. You know, accidents happen, fires start. Think, think that'll work. I think I got it. But by pressing down on that, look, Okay, you can see where the circles were because they're now pink. That wasn't a jerk thing to do. You want the game to progress, and everybody just got comfortable, and they're sitting around, you know, maybe having a barbecue, trying to avoid anything else, drinking too much mead and ale. Players will do that to a DM. Okay, these are good enough. I'm pretty sure that I don't have to sand them. In fact, sanding them would ruin it. But that I can just let it dry and go ahead and prime these. So these bits here, these bits here, and this bit too, once I get the toothpicks in, are actually going to be primed and maybe even first color painted. Um, Tomorrow, and then on Friday. You play seriously. You gave them a really nice place to hang out, and they just aren't going to go anywhere. That what can you say? That that can happen. That as players, their characters just decided to be slothful, lazy, slothful people. I can just see, somebody coming in yelling, "Help! Help! We're having a disaster! This, that, and the other thing." So the lesson there is don't give your players anything comfortable to hang out in, otherwise they'll just hang out. Um, and if you don't have space whales, the least you can do is just have it burn. But then they probably figure out some way of putting out the fire, right? That could happen. What am I seeing here? Oh, good. What I'm seeing is just a piece of trash. I put little pegs in these holes. I would say start it from scratch, but make it different enough. Like the effects of the crystals are different. You don't give them a place where they can hang out. Okay, so that they have to just be wanderers, and maybe someone will let them into an inn once for a couple of nights, and then they're booted out because they didn't pay their bill or something. Um, I think all of this fair game in a D&D game. But you just being a DM in that kind of situation, you learned something. I mean, what you did was you learned that sometimes players will not do what you had in mind at all, and that sometimes they just rather be lazy and comfortable. And who wouldn't? Like in real life, who wouldn't want to just be lazy and comfortable um, if you had that opportunity? I like your crystals, though. I think you should think about those and just imagine some ways in which they can become a real active part of the player's discovery of the land that they're living in, and the discovery of, maybe some abilities that they wouldn't have otherwise. Are you thinking about the when you say players? Do you mean the NPCs or the characters that your players were playing? Can repurpose characters, and you don't have to come in at level one. You can always come in at higher levels. So that's just something to think about too. I thought I had cleaned these up. Stuff I thought I had done like an hour and a half ago or 2 hours ago isn't done. Um, you don't have to make up a backstory. Just start over. Have them bring their characters. You just, it doesn't have to be too complicated. They can just bring their characters if they can still find them. Maybe even at the level they were at, you drop the whales at them. Oh yeah, well there you go. They just suffered a whale apocalypse, and they survived, but they were found and taken back to a rehab center or a hospital or something. A safe house of some sort, and then they become conscious again, and they're told, I don't know who you are or what you were doing, but you're all mostly dead, and there was whale guts all over the place, and you smelled really bad. But now you're okay, and you can't stay here. You need to leave soon because your insurance has run out, and then they can start fresh. They can be in a totally different place, someplace nearby, but that where they hadn't been before, so they're not familiar with it, and they can. Time has passed, maybe a lot of time, and so a lot of things can be very different than what they might have remembered, or they might not be able to remember at all. And you can just say that is that they're growing, they're coming to, and all they can remember are real basic things. Maybe they had like short-term memory loss, and they can't remember anything from the past 3 years. So they know who they are and where they were born and what their names are and stuff like that. You can. That's why not? You just wake up and rediscover yourself and sent on your way because you know whoever it was saved you, and now they're ready for you to move on. I think you can reconstitute the world pretty well. It could be like 4 or 5 or 6 years past that there was a war, and the war was completed, and the demons are taken care of, and um, there's a whole different set of a whole different set, and then you can reuse some of like the town and whatever you had created, so you don't have to totally reinvent it. But because time has passed, it can you can change it in a lot of different ways. Yeah, I mean, how much time has passed and how much the world has changed is really totally up to you. And their players don't know it until they experience it. So I think that's fair. That'll give them some incentive to do some exploring and that kind of thing. Um, yeah, I mean, that's a nice thing to do is tell them that they left the world as heroes and that they were brought back to life. So there's a lot of different ways you can recreate the world using the same characters by just having some. Since you practically killed them anyway, there's a lot of reason to believe that they would have lapsed into unconsciousness and that they need to wake up in a whole new world. And you can have them wake up with the world the way you now want it to be. Okay. And then you can make up a story about how much time has passed. So I think you can do that. That would work all right. I'm going to need to be wrapping up um, because it's past quitting time or just about quitting time for me. Uh, I really like chatting with you about your D&D work, and I appreciate it. Um, to be honest, every game I have ever played, dozens of them, has been in a homebrew. I have never played in an already made up world because our DMs were always really imaginative and they wanted the world to be their story. Otherwise, you're just playing somebody else's game. And I would go ahead and just say that. I don't want to play somebody else's game. I want to play my game. And your game could be much more interesting, less predictable, more adventurous than one that somebody else has already made up. I know for a DM, it's a lot easier to just play a game that's already done, but for a DM that's really interested in storytelling and character development and unexpected things and surprises, yeah, you want your own world. And that's why my DMs, I've never been a DM, but that's why all of my DMs have always made up a home brew. And it's just, yeah, I mean, when you do it yourself, you you can be highly creative, you know. Nothing, so yeah, that's it. You want to play your own game. So yeah, and that's my reason, and that's why I've enjoyed every one that I've ever played, is because it wasn't all like done ahead of time, and I really enjoyed it all. I'm going to make a quick plug for Dice and Dungeons. We're a Dungeons and Dragons game and show, and our D&D show is 3 times a month. Catch them on YouTube, listen to them as a podcast if you can't catch them on Sundays at 2. In our own homebrew world, it's an amazing place. Yeah, think that through and don't give up on it, okay? Once you have an outline, of what you want it to be and how you want it to go and some things fleshed out, dive into it. And it's pretty easy to come up with a way for your characters to reappear in it, but have it be very different. I'll be back on Friday at more or less 10 in the morning. Some of this will be ready for painting, or maybe even already, ready for painting. I might even have some of it. It'll all be primed. And some of it will already be finished painted. And some of it will just need to be taped in order to be color painted, but I'll be getting some progress done, and I'll also be working on cleaning up the control panels and doing more test fitting, because I, for the life of me, cannot figure out how this part works. I've tried like 3 different times. Thanks for joining in on chat, and please come back on Friday for more construction and maybe even some relaxing painting. Relaxing painting with Dice and Dungeons. See you then. Take care.